Take it away.
Well, hello everyone. Hey, Delia, can you put up the okay, sorry. Hi everyone. This week with the corner office, we're going to be doing what I'm calling gambling part two, based on the gambling policy isn't something that we can cover like in a very quick short little 5 minutes that we did, and based also some comments that I saw online and Sean let me know about and the corner office talked about. We're going to go into this a little bit in more detail. Okay, so last week we I'm having there we go. There we go. Last week, 6 takeaways from the gambling policy. The two that we're mostly going to focus on today are the top two, which is don't bet on the NFL and don't gamble at your team facility, in your hotel, or while you're traveling. Johnny last week asked about fantasy football because he talked about how Austin Eckler likes to play fantasy football. You can't play fantasy football as an NFL player as long as it's either free or the prize isn't more than $250. That is about the same um, as if someone was to do a meet and greet or something at a hotel or a casino. That's the most that they could get to. So when did the gambling policy in the NFL change? The gambling policy in the NFL, they're having a little technical difficulty. Um, Gambling policy in the NFL changed in 2018. And the reason it changed in 2018 is that there was a Supreme Court decision in the case. It was called Murphy versus the NCAA. And in that game, in that case, what had happened is there were 4 states in the United States that you could actually do sports betting because it was legal in those states. One we all know, the other was Delaware, Oregon, and Montana. Now, what had happened is New Jersey in 2012 decided that they were going to create their own ability to have gambling at licensed places. And so the sorry, trying to do things here. Um, So they put their law in place in 2012. Well, the NCAA sued the state of New Jersey, claiming that that law was a violation of what's called the PASPA law. All these things that I'm talking about, I will put up a PowerPoint presentation when they're done, and you can look up these cases and look up these things to get a little bit more detail. But what ended up happening in that is the Supreme Court agreed with the state of New Jersey, and they declared the PASPA law, which was passed by Congress back in 1992, that pretty much curtailed sports betting. They agreed with New Jersey that it was a violation of state law, of states' rights, and for them to be able to do what they wanted to do. And so sports betting just went sky. It just the game was on. Every state had laws, all of it, and that's why we saw this proliferation in the late 2010s of all these gambling book places and sports books and everything else. Now, based on that decision, the NFL made 2 changes to their gambling policy. One was that the players were not allowed to bet at the team facility or at the hotel or on a trip. That was one thing that they made. That was a change to the policy. The other thing was that it added the restriction, or it allowed let me go back. Sorry. The changes were it allowed the players to bet on sports other than football. Before that, it was just a complete ban against gambling for all players. And then it put the restriction on that they couldn't bet at the team facility. So can we go to the next slide? All right. So starting in 2019 is when we had our first suspension for gambling. And the man's name was Josh Shaw, and he was from Arizona. And he was suspended, indefinitely suspended for what they called a minimum of 1 year. And that was because he placed a bet on, and he either placed a bet on one game or two games. It doesn't matter. You do it one game, it's the immediate 1 year suspension. Then we all know the situation of Calvin Ridley in 2012. He was suspended for 1 year because he bet on an NFL game. What you can see is in 2023, we had a slew of gambling cases of suspensions. There are 6, 7 guys that were suspended in 2023. Isaiah Rodgers bet on over 100 NFL games. And then there was a bunch of, Detroit had a gambling problem, is from you can see. There's 5 people from Detroit on this list that got suspended for gambling suspensions. And not because, though I do love my boys, I did not highlight the guy from Denver, and I'm not going to try and say his name right now because I'll totally butcher it. He's suspended because he's probably going to be brought up on criminal charges in the state of Iowa because he was gambling on Iowa State games when he was there. And then at the NFL, he bet on all 32 of the Bronco games. So he's never coming back, as far as I know. The big change that they saw this year is the second slide, which is the you bet on a non-NFL game at the team facility. That was 3 players. That was a new change this year. And I'm going to go into more about that later, but essentially it's like what I said. You cannot bet on a game at the team facility. Even if you're not betting on the NFL, you can be betting on a poker game. You do it at a team facility, on the plane, at the hotel, you're going to get a minimum of 6 months, a 6-game suspension. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. And we're going to talk about why this is happening. Like, why did this uptick happen in 2023? I kind of show them as separate columns, but they work with each other. But the first thing we're going to focus on is the second side, because this is what I think is causing the new charges to start popping up about betting on non-NFL games, is because the tech has caught up to the violators. So all these sports betting books, all this stuff, they were able to possibly be able to hide some behavior that violated the policy, but the tech wasn't there to be able to catch them. Now you have the tech. There's geolocation on your phones. You can pinpoint in exactly where that bet was made. Like, was it made at their house or was it made at the team facility? They can find that. All the sports betting websites have what are called integrity companies that are checking to make sure that everything that sports betting site does is in compliance with the state that they're incorporated in, and also in the states that they do business in, because those states can have very different laws. But the integrity companies also work as kind of a middleman between the league and the sports betting companies. And what the integrity company does is gives a list of all the players in the NFL, all the coaches, all the employees, the owners, because remember, owners, employees, NFL are also subject to the gaming policy. Theirs is much stricter than the players. The players can at least bet on non-NFL sports. Everyone beside the players can't bet on anything whatsoever. These integrity companies flag names. They put a list of the names of everybody who should not be placing bets. And what they can do is, if a name gets flagged, it shows up in a bet, they can check the geolocation. They can check where this was, who made it. Did it come out of their house? Did it come out of the team facility? So the tech has caught up. And that's why I think there was a big proliferation of gambling suspensions in 2023. And that happening goes to the other side of it, which is this is a zero tolerance law. There is no getting out of it. Because if the NFL has one instance that shows that these guys bet on their own team and affected a game, they're going to be under investigation by state and federal authorities and enforcement agencies. And they're going to be pulled in front of investigations. And there goes the NFL's stake in a $220 billion sports betting business. That's the real reason why they have this policy. Okay. They're in partnership. Yes. 3 of their major sponsors are all gambling websites: DraftKings, FanDuel, and Caesars. And those guys have the right to use the NFL logo when they do their marketing. So there's a lot of reciprocalness that's going back and forth between these two. So one last point. So I kind of mentioned in it. So when those 3 guys so it was a wave. The first wave was everything on the right side from 2023. All the guys that had bet on an actual NFL game. The second wave came in April when they got the people who bet on a non-NFL game. What the league did then was sent out a letter to every agent in the NFL and said, you need to remind your players they cannot bet at team facilities. And they reiterated this policy. And there is a lot of training. They have to go through the training once a year. They have to do Zoom calls. They have to do testing. This is not a policy. These guys know what they're doing. They know what the policy is. They're choosing to try to get away with it. And that brings us to something that I thought maybe like the 4 of us can kind of talk about, which is, why are these guys doing this? Like, they know what the policy is. They know if they may not bet on it, like they're not willing to take a chance at a year suspension. Calvin Ridley was having some mental issues at the time, and he's actually come out and said at that time he was doing things that would help him. He wouldn't be bored and it would engage himself. So he's 100% taken all responsibility for what he did. The people that are betting at the team facility and choosing that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like they think they're not going to get caught. And they do, and it's a 6-game suspension. Most of these guys, they never play in the NFL again. Any thoughts?
You're muted.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, sorry about that. I was like, wait a minute. Well, my biggest thing with all of this, and again, we touched on it very little last week. Betting in sports has been around for how long, right? I mean, you look at everything from Pete Rose in baseball getting the lifetime ban for betting and all that. And now, like you said, your 3 major sponsors are all gambling sites. And you can argue this all day, I'm sure. And yes, guys may are arrogant enough to think that, hey, well, I'm not going to get caught. I'm just placing a small bet on my phone for, whatever. But the fact that it's I still think in some way, and again, I could be in the minority here, but just the fact that your 3 major sponsors are betting sites, but you're telling again, betting on football is one thing, but not being able to place a bet on anything really, how does that make sense? Like, don't you, whenever somebody's your sponsor, like, don't you encourage people to like use the sponsor or to, patronize the sponsor? But here you're going, no, you can't do that. These are our 3 biggest sponsors, but I don't want you doing any of that. I don't care what it is. You don't do it. I just find that a little weird. That's just me.
Just to clarify, remember. No. And I think that's a very valid point. But just to clarify, remember, it's the players can bet on non-NFL sports. It's everyone else that can't bet on any sports. The policy is actually, the policy is actually stricter on everyone else than the players.
Right.
So, but I
No, I get
agree
that.
with you. I mean, sports betting's been around since the 1920s. I mean, ever since it's been going around. And before it was with bookies and all these other things, there was also federal laws that were involved with wires and sending money and all of that. And I'm not going to get into it. That's a deep dive we don't need to talk about. But yeah, I get that trying to reconcile your major sponsors with a gambling policy. But I also think it's a little bit of, because in 2018, a lot of these current players, they were in high school, they were in college, they'd make these little bets. It's a game. It was something for them to do to try and maybe make money. But if they were on scholarship with the NCAA, they can't make more than $250 a month. So I don't know how much money they would make. But these are guys that they like the thrill. They like being able to beat the odds and do these things. So, but it's just one of those, like, I agree the reconciliation is weird, but this policy is straightforward. And the reason the NFL came down with the hammer this year is because it has to be a zero tolerance thing. There cannot be any wiggle room on this, because one bad situation, they have a Pete Rose of their own. The federal government's going to come in and rip this right out of the NFL's hands. And the NFL's going to lose money. And that's the thing. The NFL is a business. So
yeah, true.
They can't really. Yeah, they can bet on that. An owner can't, but a player can. So,
thank you, Scott.
Technically, no, he can't.
Right.
Yeah,
he's still under contract. Technically, right? He can't do
still
nothing.
Under contract. Yeah. So one quick thing before I end my segment, I wanted to kind of put this out there and say, I really want this to be an interactive segment with people that on not Roadhouse. Geez, I got Pet Swayze on my brain today, I guess. Roundhouse. Roundtable. And yeah, really.
What's the name of the show again? What are we doing? Who is this? Where are we?
We're the Roundhouse.
Roadhouse.
That kicker kicked my brain into another dimension, I swear. I want it to be an interactive segment. So anybody has any questions about an NFL policy, or why was this person, like, if you have a question about why this person might have been suspended, or why this happened, or why that happened, I don't really want to get into like officiating calls or things like that. But if you have something that has like a legal tinge to it or an idea to it, put a comment in the comments. I am reading those, and I will try. Hopefully this segment won't be a full 10 to 15 minutes of one topic. We might be able to cover a couple of comments and look at that. So send me your ideas. I'm up for looking into anything I have. I have a copy of the CBA sitting to the side, and I'll dig into policies all you want. So,
all right. Nope. Thank you, Tina. That sounds great.